So after 2 years of not being able to travel to one of my favorite places, I'm finally back in Asia, and for a month I will be in Singapore. However, it was not easy preparing for this trip. Singapore just released a vaccinated travel lane process which allows quarantine-free travel to Singapore by air. And in this video, I will go over the requirements to enter Singapore as well as my experience with the vaccinated travel lane, specifically from flying from San Francisco to Singapore. So to be eligible to enter Singapore, you have to be, one, of course, vaccinated. Two, you have to fly from a vaccinated travel lane country that Singapore considers as safe, and you have to be within that country within the past 14 consecutive days. Next, you have to fly on a vaccinated travel lane flight in order to enter Singapore. I'm going to be flying direct from San Francisco to Singapore via Singapore Airlines on flight SQ33. On the Safe Travel Singapore website as well as Singapore Airlines, this is the flight that they consider as a vaccinated travel lane flight. If you're booking, it has to say that it's a vaccinated travel lane flight, or else you're not going to be let into Singapore, or you might have to quarantine when you arrive. I unfortunately made the mistake of not buying the correct flight and had to be on the phone with customer service for hours just trying to change it, and I had to pay so much more just to change it as well. So make sure you read the fine print, or when you're booking, make sure it does say it's a vaccinated travel lane flight. And I recommend doing this on the airline's original website, not just like a travel agency website or a third party like Priceline. And also the Safe Travels website does include a list of countries and what airlines operate as a vaccinated travel lane flight for those countries. So be sure to check that out. I flew Singapore Airlines, and they also have a list of scheduled flights or scheduled vaccinated travel lane flights that they operate by city. So I'm gonna include both of those links in the description box below. And for my experience flying to Singapore, it was quite decent. Checking in does take a while as they were strict on making sure everyone had the correct paperwork needed. It was a pretty full flight as well, and they gave everyone these care kits that included masks and disinfecting wipes, and the food was not that good if anyone was wondering. And the next thing that you have to apply for is a vaccinated travel pass, which is basically like a visa for vaccinated travelers, separate from your normal country visa. But basically the process was very easy. The application took literally like 10 minutes. They're just going to ask for your basic information such as your name, your passport number, when you intend to enter Singapore, and where you plan to stay. On the application, you also have to upload your proof of vaccination, and it has to be a QR code. If you're from California, I can also include in the description box of where to get the QR code. It's really easy to get that as well. The whole application is automated, so if all the information that you entered is valid as well as the QR code, you should literally get the travel pass through email the minute or second after you submitted the application. At least that's what happened for me. Again, it's very, very easy. And if you did anything wrong with the application, don't worry. On the website, it does say that there is no limit of how many travel passes you can get. And the next thing that you have to do in order to enter Singapore is, of course, take a pre-departure COVID test 48 hours before your flight. And you also have to receive a negative COVID test result before the flight as well. On the Singapore Safe Travels website, it mentioned that the COVID test has to be a PCR test, and your result must say it was a PCR test as well as include your name, passport number, or birthday. They are pretty strict about this type of information, so I just took the test at the airport just to be safe. And depending where you're from, the time frame of the test taken might be different, but I had to take my test within 48 hours before my flight. Another thing that you have to do for the vaccinated travel lane is to buy COVID insurance. Singapore does list a few options or a few providers that provides health or COVID insurance, and I just went with the cheapest option. I went with HL Assurance, and I just got their basic plus plan for 46 Singaporean dollars. I think the price might vary depending on where you're coming from and how long you plan to stay in Singapore, but for me, the price that I quoted for staying a month in Singapore as well as coming from America, I was just quoted $46. Next, you have to pay for an on-arrival COVID test. You can either prepay this or just pay when you arrive. However, based on the research that I have done, everyone said to just prepay in advance because the whole process will be a lot quicker and faster. Coming into Singapore, everything was like very smooth. I felt like everything at the airport was like super organized. I think from landing in Singapore to like finding a taxi to go to like my hotel for quarantine, it took about like less than an hour. Most of the time was definitely like waiting for customs and them checking my paperwork and also grabbing my luggage. But after grabbing my luggage and going to the COVID test site, which is like outside the airport, that was like super organized. I just basically had to like walk through this like tent thingy, show them my documents that I prepaid for a COVID test, and they like swabbed me. I couldn't like film anything in there obviously, but I was like really surprised like how organized everything was. After I took my initial on-arrival COVID test, it took about 5 hours to get my results back, maybe a little bit less than 5 hours. It was between like 4 hours and 45 minutes to like 5 hours, so it's really short. If you're jet lagged, obviously during that time you can just sleep. However, I was just like patiently waiting so I can just go outside. Then every day for a week while you're in Singapore, you do have to take a COVID test. On days 2, 4, 5, and 6, you have to take a self-administered COVID test at home, so with one of those test kits. And then on days 3 and 7, you have to go to like a quick testing center to take your COVID test. For that, it's 15 Singaporean dollars, and you do have to pay online. You can't pay by cash when going there, and you have to also prepay and book your appointment. So I just got back from my final COVID test, and I went to a different testing center, but that one was still like very well organized. It did take a lot longer because I did go during opening, but again, everything was like super organized. I'm very impressed with how Singapore handles everything. And at the testing center, you do have to do the test yourself, but it is supervised. People are like walking around and like watching you do it and making sure you're doing it right. Plus they also have like a guide of how to do it. The first one like that I went to for day 3 didn't, but on day 7 there was a guide on how to do it step by step, and it was very easy. I was probably in and out within like 10-15 minutes, and that includes like checking in and like doing the test. And you get your test results back within 30 minutes by email, and I tested negative for both on day 3 and day 7, which is great, which means I don't really have to do the testing anymore. But if I do feel like under the weather, if I feel off, I will just like buy another test from like 7-Eleven or something, and to make sure I am like safe, because you just like never know. The only other COVID test that I do have to take is the one where I have to take it 1 day before I fly. At least that's the requirement to enter back into the States. So I'd have to find another testing center for that, but I think that should be pretty easy. Another thing you have to do in Singapore is download the Trace Together app, and it's basically a contact tracing app that you have to use in Singapore. They're gonna scan this everywhere that you go, and it's basically to document where you have been and who you have been in contact with, and the app will notify you if you've been in close contact with someone that has COVID and you need to get tested for it. You do also have to electronically submit a Singapore arrival card within 3 days of your trip. So I'm gonna be arriving in Singapore December 21st, so I would have to submit my arrival card anywhere between December 18th and December 21st. And lastly, if required, if you need a visa to enter Singapore, you do have to do that. Thankfully, America doesn't have to do that, so I don't have to do that. Yeah, I think that is it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you find any of this like tips and experience very helpful for your next trip to Singapore, please be sure to give it a thumbs up or leave me some feedback in the comments down below. And I hope to see you guys in the next video. Bye!
To mess up a good thing. Another night ruined, I don't even know when we became this way. Now you're acting so different than when